Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining. Welcome to today's Norms and Behavioral Change talk, the first talk of the new year. My name is Ingela Alger, and I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Social Norms and Behavioral Dynamics at the University of Pennsylvania. And just for you to know, this seminar will be recorded, and we will upload the video to your YouTube channel and website. So moving to today's agenda, we have two very exciting talks for you to start the year. We'll start with a brief talk by an early career researcher, Jeannie Huang from here UPenn, and it will be followed by the main talk by Ingela Alger from Toulouse School of Economics. And after these talks, we will have a brief Q&A session open to all participants that will be towards the end of the session. So for anyone who might be new to this series, the NoBeC talks are organized by the Center for Social Norms and Behavioral Dynamics here at Penn, with the support of the Philosophy, Politics and Economics program, and in partnership with the Master of Behavioral and Decision Sciences program. And the center itself is a research center which provides specialized consulting, research, and training services to organizations throughout the world seeking to enact positive behavioral change. And here you can see the schedule of our upcoming NoBeC talks. You can also visit our website to register for these future talks, or you can scan the QR code right here. Now we only include the upcoming talks until June, but in our website we actually have the full schedule of the entire 2026 lineup. And the upcoming talks are also really exciting, so I really recommend you to register for them. And lastly, before we turn to our speakers, I will just quickly note a few ground rules. So once you join, you should be automatically muted, but if you are not, please mute yourself. If possible, please also keep your camera on so we have a more interactive discussion through the session. If you have any questions, you can use the chat at any time, but you can also raise your hand at the end of the session during the Q&A. And as I said in the beginning, the recordings of these sessions will be uploaded to our website and our YouTube channel. So our first presentation today is by an early career researcher, Jeannie Huang, and she's from our center. So Jeannie Huang is a PhD candidate in psychology at the University of Pennsylvania with a dual master's degree in statistics and data science from the Wharton School. She earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Maryland, College Park in 2016, and after graduating, she joined the Center for Social Norms and Behavioral Dynamics as a research specialist, where she worked with interdisciplinary teams to measure social networks, identify behavioral drivers, and design interventions for collective behavior change. Her work centers on how people perceive and reason about social norms. She studies the interaction between individual cognitive processes and social environments to understand how people form beliefs about collective behavior and how these beliefs shape action. To do so, she draws on tools from social, cognitive, and network science, including behavioral experiments, natural language processing, and network analysis. And she's also an affiliated member of the Social Interaction Lab at the Stanford University. So Jeannie's presentation today is on repetitive interactions strengthen social normativity. Before we move to the talk, I just wanted to quickly remind you that if any questions come up as she presents, please feel free to put them in the chat. Because of the limited time, if you would like, you can also leave your email so Jeannie can also write to you to answer your questions after the session. So now I will stop sharing my screen. So the stage is yours, Jeannie. Thank you so much. Jeannie, you're muted. Can you please unmute yourself?
Thank you so much, Angela, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jane Equan, and I am a PhD candidate in psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. So I'm really excited to share this work in collaboration with Robert Hocking at Stanford and also Christina Vicari here as my advisor at Penn on how repetitive coordination strengthens social normativity. From tipping in the restaurant to recycle, to wearing a tie to a wedding, and also stop at the stop sign, we follow those unspoken social rules in our everyday life. Some of those rules can be, arbitrary, such as driving on the left side of the road, especially Eurasian. They are a convention. As suggested by philosopher David Lewis, it functions as a coordination device in the sense that people follow it to reduce the individual cost to coordinate with each other. However, over time, those conventions can acquire a normative force. So, for example, driving on the opposite side of the road is not only as a deviation from those coordination, but also is judged as normatively reckless. So those conventions becoming a social norms, they're not only just descriptive, but also normative in a sense that people act because others do so, and also because they believe that is socially appropriate. So the question I'm really interested is how do some of those conventions that start as a descriptive coordination devices gradually acquire a normative force and becoming a social norm? To answer this question, I look at the literatures on how individuals making those descriptive to normative inference. So previous research have suggested that people associating what is common or prevalent with what is normative. And when a behavior is repeated, people perceive it as commonly practiced. But those previous studies have primarily focused on individual behaviors. It remains unclear whether this repetition lead to a normative inference in the coordination context. It is also not clear that what could be the mechanism for this repetition effect, if it is actually existing. So here I want to ask two research questions. The first one is, do more repetition of a successful coordination could lead to a stronger inferences of the social normativity? And if so, what is a possible mechanism? So here I want to propose a possible model for this convention to norm shift. The repeated coordination could lead individuals to interpreting those actions as a sign of an implicit agreement. From a social contract viewpoint, the action could signal that the actor has made agreements to perform such actions. So in this case, that the deviation from such inferred implicit agreement, or people had made a joint commitment or implicit joint commitment, could suggest not just the person deviating from a coordinated action, but also agreement has been broken. So the greater the number of repetition, the stronger the signal would be. So to testing this framework, we designed a series of study, primarily grouped in three different kind of approach. So first, we kind of want to do this like a proof of concept to looking at whether repetitive coordination leading to this is like social normative inference. And to do that, we use economic gains, primarily using the third-party punishment paradigm. And the second, we also want to kind of testing our hypothesis in a more ecologically valid context, where we would use social vignette, which describing an actual social coordination scenario or like social interaction scenario. We also kind of directly measure to what extent people infer a tacit agreement or joint commitment. And the third, we kind of design a great world games where participants would interacting with each other, not only in the matrix context, but also in the great context. We're kind of trying to understand what are the computational mechanism for this process. And given the time constraint, I will only focus on the first part of this three-part study. Primarily, I would show several economic games that suggest that repeated coordination would lead to a social normative inference. So here's the general paradigm that we're using. So it's the third-party punishment paradigms. Participants joined the games, and they were being told that they will view the interaction of two randomly selected players from a previous game, and they repetitively interacting with each others. And in this example, those two players would play a prisoner dilemma game. And we kind of systematically manipulating whether those two players play the game for 2 rounds, which is like a low repetition condition, or 6 rounds, which is a high repetition condition. In each of those repeated action, those two players always coordinating with each others. However, in the critical rounds, one of the player would deviate. So for example, in this case, one of the player would deviate to play deviation, which is D, from the repetitive play from that both player would choose P and P. And after that, we ask participants to make a decision whether they would like to deduct points from a player and which one they would choose to deduct points. So the manipulation is quite straightforward, relatively simple, which is the number of rounds the participant observed two player play. So this is the results. So we found that people are more likely to deduct points or sanction the deviators when the number of play is high as compared to low in the prisoner dilemma games. We also testing using the same paradigms, but we kind of manipulating the payoff structure, where in this case, we have a stack hunt game. People start to hunting a stack together, and then in the critical rounds, one of the player deviate to stack a deer, to hunt a deer. We observe the same effect, which people are more likely to sanction the deviators when the prior play is repeated as compared for 6 rounds as compared to when they're repeated for 2 rounds. And again, we also tested in a pure coordination games. In this case, that there's no clear incentives for people to deviate because they're not personally benefiting from the deviation. And also, it's not because such deviation could be risk dominant, such as in the stack hunt games. And here, we again replicating this result, we see that people are more likely to sanction the deviator when the number of repetition is high as compared to when the number of repetition is low. So we could say that social normativity can be strengthened by this repetitive coordination. So next, we're also interested to what extent this could generalize to other group members. So in this case, we tell participants that they would observe pairs of participants play with each others, and the pairs only play with each other for 1 round and only 1 round. However, the previous play was a public knowledge, in the sense that every player know what has happened in the previous round. So again, here we manipulating whether participants see those players play for 2 rounds versus 6 rounds. So just very straightforward manipulation of repetition. So here we use a prisoner dilemma game. And again, we also find this repetition effect where we see that people are more likely to sanction the deviators when the previous play within this groups is 6 rounds as compared to 2 rounds. And we can see this repetition effect generalized to other group members who play with their partner only once when the previous play is a public knowledge. And lastly, we're also interested what could be a moderator or what could be a boundary condition for this repetition effect. Does it emerge all the time? So here, one of our hypotheses is that it's depending on whether the deviation make the other person worse off. In other words, whether this deviation creates negative externality. So here we use a stack hunt game where there's 2 equilibriums. One is payoff dominant, where switching to where one of the person deviating would make the other person worse off. The other natural equilibrium is risk dominance, where the person deviating would not make the other person worse off. So the other's payoff would be socially independent. So we see that when the previous coordination was independent, we do not really observe this repetition effect. So we can conclude here that normativity can emerge from or being intensified by repetitive coordination, particularly when this deviation makes others worse off or creating a negative externality. So this is a quick summary of what we have observed using various economic games with different payoff structures. So first, social normativity can emerge from repetitive coordination. It can be generalized to other group members when the previous play is a common knowledge, and emerge only when the repeated action is socially independent. So this is my talk, and thank you so much for your attention. I'm really happy to take questions and share more information about the other two parts of our study. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny, for the excellent and very comprehensive presentation. Given the time, we have time to only take one question before we move on, if anyone wants to raise their hand. Okay, otherwise we will move on, but if you have questions for Jenny, just a reminder, you can leave them in the chat. And you can also, Jenny can answer to you in the chat through the presentation. Otherwise, we will also have a brief Q&A session at the very end of the session. So I will share my screen again. Okay, so now we will move to the main talk today, which will be by Dr. Ingela Alger. Ingela Alger is a CNRS Senior Researcher in Economics at the Toulouse School of Economics, a CEPR Research Fellow, and a visiting professor at the University of Gothenburg. Since 2012, she has been heavily invested in building and managing the Institute for Advanced Study in Toulouse. Ingela Alger had an ERC Advanced Grant from 2019 to 2024, and in 2022, she received the CNRS Cyber Medal. Her research agenda centers on the long-term evolution of human motivation and its consequences for today's societies. Ingela's talk today is on norms and norm change driven by social-Kantian preferences. So Ingela, I will stop sharing my screen now, so you can begin sharing your presentation. And again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Do you see the slides?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, and I will just make it full screen. Okay. Okay, well, thanks, Angela, for this very nice introduction, and thanks, Christina, for the invite. It's a great honor to be talking here, and also I very much look forward to comments on this project. So I'm an economist by training, as Angela mentioned, and but I've been working for a long time in an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary environment, and as you know, probably, right, there are different norms of presentation in different disciplines, and in economics, we're very happy to take questions during the talk. And I would invite you to do so, especially if you have clarification questions. And I will be having quite a bit of math also here. So I really want to make sure that everybody is on board with what's going on. So please don't hesitate to ask questions during the talk. I'm not sure that I will be able to see raised hands though. So Angela, if you maybe could keep an eye on that, I would be really grateful. Okay, thanks. Okay, yes, so norms and norm change driven by a specific class of preferences called Social-Kantian preferences. So, oops. Yeah. Okay. Examples, stepping outside to smoke at a party, respecting the order of arrival in queues, adopting environmentally friendly behaviors. All those are behaviors that generate positive externalities, but at a cost to their authors. And in many countries, these specific behaviors that I mentioned here are considered natural. Deviations trigger both surprise and disapproval, and they are considered to be the norm. But as you all know, norms vary across time and can also vary across space. And what I do here is I propose a theoretical model that can help to explain such variation. So obviously, I'm far from the first one to think about this, and there's a huge literature having proposed theories on the exact same question. So I'm here mentioning just a small part of this very, very large literature, to which Christina, of course, has been an immense contributor. And I'm certainly not doing justice to her work, but I'm mentioning a few of her works here. So there are lots of theoretical models on norms, conventions, and other behavioral regularities. I also noticed that the vocabulary, I mean, there are many different kinds of norms and behavioral regularities. So a long list of theoretical models. It's a very active research area, which is, as we can see from the numerous recent surveys. So it's really nice to be working on this right now. And there's also several recent contributions on the potential for interdisciplinary approaches, and I think that's really a neat feature of these questions. And as I said, I really look forward to getting comments from different disciplines. So there is a huge literature, and what has been, to sum up a little bit what this literature has detected as factors that influence individual behavior besides own material payoff. Here also the vocabulary varies a little bit across contributions, but essentially what I perceive is these three factors to be, first of all, the personal moral norm, okay, the action that the individual believes is the right thing to do. Then there is the descriptive norm, or the normative, empirical expectations, which is the beliefs about the others' actions, what others are doing, right, the first order beliefs. And then we have the injunctive norm, or the normative expectation, beliefs about which actions others would approve of or disapprove of. This will sometimes also refer to as second order beliefs. Okay, so that's neat, but it shows also the complexity of this. Now, this is great. Now, I'm coming from economics background, and as you know, in economics we have this paradigm whereby we view individual behavior as emanating from preferences and information beliefs. So we tend to want to have some kind of preference-based explanations for individual behavior. So these factors here have been explained in with various preference-based models. So the most commonly found preference-based explanations in the literature are first the conformity desire, right? So, or sometimes called conformity bias. And here I'm using this color code, so it's red. And so this is to direct back here your attention to the descriptive norm. So the conformity desire drives would explain why an individual would respond to changes in the empirical expectations or the descriptive norm. Okay, and then a second common preference-based explanation is a concern for the perceived social appropriateness of one's actions. And so the blue here is refers back to the injunctive norm or the normative expectation. So if one has a concern for the perceived social appropriateness, then one should care about, or that one's behavior should be sensitive to the injunctive norm, or what one believes is what others think is socially appropriate. That's Quite clear. And finally, a quite common preference-based explanation in the literature is image concerns. So that one would care about how others perceives one's image. And here this is supposed to be kind of purple. It's supposed to be a mix of red and blue, because if you care about your social image, you will not only care about what you believe others think is socially appropriate, but you will also care about the descriptive norm, because that has an impact on the signaling value that you perceive in your actions. So, for example, if nobody else is generous and you are generous, that's a very strong signal of your altruistic concerns, for example. So the image concerns make you sensitive to both the descriptive norm and the injunctive norm. Okay, so we have this extremely rich theoretical literature. Now, okay, so I will claim that maybe there are two things missing still, and I will try to offer a theory that addresses those missing parts. And so, first of all, we know right from a large body of experimental literature, and also literature using data outside of the experimental lab, that people care about how their material payoff compares to that of others. So and so when we think about these norm situations, these concerns for inequity in terms of material payoffs should intuitively matter for the willingness to deviate from what others are doing. And the second piece that I would claim is kind of missing is a sort of simple, clear theory for where the personal moral norms come from. How do they come about? So what I do in this paper is I argue that I address both issues by proposing a model where individuals have what I call social-Kantian preferences. So what are these preferences? I will come to that in a minute. So but before I tell you what they are about, I will share with you the background of this. So, why did I start working on this, and where did the idea of using these preferences come from? And it turns out that, so I have quite a bit of work on the long-term evolution of preferences, right? So when individuals inherit preferences from somebody in the previous generation, and when the preferences have consequences for behavior, and the behaviors have consequences for reproductive success in some sense, then one can use theoretical models to try to figure out what kind of preferences should be selected for or selected against due to evolution. And so I have done some work on that, and this particular preference class then emerged from mathematical models that sought to say, from a very large set of different preferences, are there any particular preferences that stand out as being particularly viable from an evolutionary perspective? So, and I just wanted to mention two papers here. So, what together with Jürgen Webel, we published a paper a few years ago where we found that when preferences are expressed at the level of reproductive success, really, then evolution should be expected to select preferences that combine two things: self-interest, so interest for one's own reproductive success, but also a Kantian concern, which works in the following way. It makes the individual ponder what his or her reproductive success would be if others were to adopt the same behavior as them. So what would my reproductive success be if my behavior was universalized? And then subsequently, we developed a more detailed model that allowed us, together with evolutionary biologist Laurent Lehmann, which allowed us to also get predictions for what are evolutionarily viable preferences when these are expressed at the level of material payoffs, which is a level of preferences that is more relevant for social scientists, because that's the kind of data that we work with. So what we found in this paper in Journal of Economic Theory in 2020 is that when preferences are expressed at the level of material payoffs, then evolution should be expected to lead to preferences that entail a combination of three things: material self-interest, a Kantian concern at the level of material payoff, that is, the individual will ponder what would happen if, hypothetically, others were to adopt the same behavior. And now there's a third component, which is other regard. So there's also a comparison of own material payoff with the material payoff of others. And so when I saw this preference class, it made me think about norms, and this is what led me to build this model using these preferences as a starting point and see what kind of predictions one gets. Okay, are there any questions at this point? No? Okay. All right, so then I will jump into the theoretical model, describe the interaction that I use for the model, describe the Social-Kantian preferences in detail, and then go to the results. So what I do is I adopt a model with this simplest possible interaction that you can imagine. It's a public goods game, which is perfectly symmetric. Everybody is identical. And each individual can either contribute to the public good, and that's the notation there is xi is equal to 1 if individual I contributes, or not contribute. So it's just a binary action. And then this is also simultaneous. So there's a simultaneous move game. And what individual I gets as a material benefit when he or she contributes or selects action xi, when the others on average make a contribution si. Okay, so here this is the average contribution of the others, n minus 1 here is the number of other individuals, and this is just a sum of the contribution of the other individuals. So when there's a share si of others who contribute, then the individual I gets this benefit from others' contributions. And the second term here is the individual's own benefit minus the cost if he or she contributes. So if xi is 0, of course, then there is no such net benefit from the own contribution. Okay, so a notation here for this material payoff is pi, and the first argument is the own contribution, and the second argument is the share of other contributions. Okay. So that's happening at the level of the material payoffs. And now I'm going to posit these Social-Kantian preferences as taking that as a starting point. So I'm going to walk through now the terms of this utility function, as we call it in economics. Okay, so the first term here, so the individual I, when choosing the contribution xi, or the action xi, when the others on average contribute si, is first of all, it's the own material payoff, as we saw on the previous slide. So that's the material self-interest. And then we have the second term here, which is the Kantian term. Okay, so what does the Kantian part do? So let's look at this. So there are several parts to this. Now there's a new variable that comes up here. It's yi. What is yi? Well, yi is the notation that I use here for individual i's personal moral norm. Okay, that is the action that individual I think is the right thing to do. And the way that I concludes on what is the right thing to do is that I calculates what his or her material payoff would be if the action was universalized. So this is the calculation. So if x is 0, and if that action was universalized, then I would get a benefit, a material payoff of 0. If the action to contribute, that is x is equal to 1, if that is universalized, then the individual I would get a material payoff of NB minus C. And so if NB is greater than C, then the right thing to do is to contribute. If NB is smaller than C, right, then the right thing to do is to not contribute. So this Kantian reasoning here explains how individual I comes to the conclusion of what is the right thing, which action is the right thing to do, the personal moral norm. Okay, that's one thing here in this Kantian term. The other aspect of the Kantian term is that here, xi, that is individual I's real action, right? Yes, Christina? I think you're muted.
It's very interesting. I have a question about the personal moral norm. I understand that the universality,
Yes.
spell it, which is proper, is not just Kantian, is any moral norm. Moral is entails universality. The problem here, why you say if universalizing would maximize my own material welfare and not everybody else welfare? I tell you why. Because we may have a moral norm which we may universalize, but which may make some people better off and some worse off. We could have that.
Right.
And the question is, so wouldn't you want to say maximize everyone welfare, or you're just thinking on welfare, independently of what universality entails?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So, I mean, the framework that I have chosen to work with here, the simple public goods game, which is symmetric, that also leads me to have this very simple answer to that question. However, one could indeed think of a more complex model where, for example, you would have rich and poor people. And then what I would then do with this model is that I would let the individual take a behind the veil of ignorance approach by specifying that, the contribution would be conditional on being rich or poor.
Very good. I was thinking of roles, in fact.
Yeah. So I have other work on that, but not in the context of norms. But yes, indeed, that would
Thank
be,
you.
Yeah. So whenever the individual behavior is aligned with the personal moral norm, then this term is 0. Then the person is happy with that behavior. But if the contribution is or the action is different from the personal moral norm, then this term is not equal to 0. And in particular, then if the individual believes that the right thing to do is to contribute and does not contribute, and if gamma here, so gamma here is a preference parameter which measures the weight that the individual attaches to this Kantian concern. So if gamma is strictly positive, then the individual suffers psychologically from deviating from the personal moral norm. Okay. Okay, so then we have the third part here, which is these two different terms, but that's the social part. it compares the individual's own material payoff to the other's material payoff. And because of the simplicity, again, of this the public good scheme that I've chosen here, what that comparison boils down to is really comparing only the cost of the contribution. So this term here pertains to a setting where the individual would contribute more than the average. So if xi is greater than si, the individual contributes more and therefore has a smaller material payoff than others. Then if alpha is positive, then the individual dislikes getting a smaller material payoff than others. And I will call this that sacrifice aversion. The individual dislikes making a larger sacrifice than others. And then finally, here, this term is the opposite case, where the individual makes a smaller contribution than the average, in which case the individual has a larger material payoffs than the others. And if beta I is positive, then the individual dislikes being ahead materially of the others. Now, alpha and beta could also be negative. So it could be that for some reason, maybe I'm a bit strange, because most people have a positive alpha that's been measured in experiments. But maybe I like being ahead of others, or maybe I like being, maybe I could like being behind others. I could also like being ahead of others. There's some evidence of some people liking being ahead of others, but also some people dislike being ahead of others, in which case I would say that there is solidarity. Okay, if beta positive, I have solidarity towards the others. Yes, Angela.
Yes, could both the sacrifice aversion and the solidarity effect be explained by inequality aversion? So you just don't like being different from others,
Yeah.
you just want to be the same, or if there is something special about the being ahead or behind?
No, this is exactly, I mean, it's really very, this is like the Fair-Schmidt version of inequity aversion. The thing is that it comes out of the evolutionary analysis. So it's exactly this combination of motivations that comes out from the evolutionary analysis. But it turns out that it involves comparing own material payoff to that of others. Yeah. Okay, did I answer your question? Okay. Okay, so I'll have that. So each individual is equipped with such preferences and with some value of gamma, some value of alpha, and some value of beta. And these could be essentially anything. I just assume that gamma is positive and that alpha plus beta is positive also for simplicity. Okay, so now we can then start looking at what this preference class implies for behavior. So in this game, individual I will contribute if and only if this inequality holds. I'm just plugging in xi is equal to 1 on the left-hand side and xi equal to 0 on the right-hand side, and this is what the expressions turn out to be. Okay, so then what we find from this is that if alpha plus beta is 0, then this inequality turns out to be independent of Si, the share of others who contribute, and then individual I contributes if and only if gamma is large enough. That is, if the Kantian concern is strong enough. And but if alpha plus beta is strictly positive, then this condition can also be written as a condition on the share of others who contribute. So then the share of the others who contribute must be large enough. Okay, so this is the first result, is that the individual's preferences uniquely determine a threshold that depends on the values of these preference parameters, such that I contribute if and only if the share of others who contribute exceeds this threshold. And so depending on the preference parameters, depending also on B and C, as you can see from here, you see that N and B and C also turn up in these threshold, the expression for the threshold. But then one can classify people into 3 types of people, depending on whether either they contribute whatever the others do, or they never contribute, they do not contribute independent of what the others do, or they have a threshold somewhere between 0 and 1 so that they contribute if and only if sufficiently many others do so. So then you recognize, I believe you recognize now the same qualitative nature as you will find in many other models. So what we find here, right, is that if the n individuals have different preferences, they may have different thresholds. So for a given distribution of these preference parameters, there is a distribution of thresholds in the population, and so this is qualitatively similar to the classic threshold model for collective behavior. So it endogenizes what these preferences endogenize the threshold distribution. So then it's not surprising that we will find some interesting things going on in the dynamics. But so before going to the dynamics, I have just a couple of results on the static analysis. So if suppose that this game was played once, and then we can calculate, one can show them that there is at least one Nash equilibrium. There may also be several Nash equilibria, and that nobody contributes, that is n star is equal to 0, that's a Nash equilibrium if and only if there are no individuals who are committed contributors. So for this to be a Nash equilibrium, they cannot be very strongly Kantian individuals, whereas there exists a Nash equilibrium where everybody contributes if and only if there are no individuals who never contribute. So this is quite clear, and that there can be many Nash equilibria. And I think it's important just to point out one thing, which is that if all the individuals they can be somewhat Kantian, but suppose that they're weakly Kantian, right? So that they are not willing to contribute if nobody else does, then the 0 contributions is an equilibrium. And this is true even though they all agree that the right thing to do is to contribute, right? So they can still be somewhat Kantian and still have this notion of using the universalization reasoning to conclude that the right thing to do is to contribute, but nonetheless 0 contributions can be a Nash equilibrium. And why? That's driven by the fact that individuals tend not to want to make a larger material sacrifice than others. So I know that contributing is the right thing to do, but I will do it only if at least someone else does it, right? Okay. So now, unless there are questions, now I thought I would go to just a couple of examples.
I have another quick question, Ingela.
Yes, of course.
In your model, you have the personal norm part, which is the Kantian preference, and then you have the other regarding part, which is depending on whether others contribute. So that seems to capture a little bit like the descriptive norm. I pay attention to how others
Absolutely,
behave.
yeah.
But do you incorporate injunctive norms somewhere in your model? So not the personal norm and not others' behavior, but what I think others approve of. Is that captured somewhere?
Thanks a lot for raising that question. I forgot to mention that. So indeed, first of all, your first point is that this social part is indeed, it implies that the individual pays attention to SI, which is the descriptive norm, right? Or the empirical expectation, for sure. And indeed, in this with this preference class, there is no concern there are no image concerns. There is no concern for social appropriateness in the sense that I do not care about what others think is the right thing to do. So there is no injunctive norm in this model. One could add it, right? But what my exercise, the simple exercise here is to take these preferences as given that we found in the JET paper and apply it to this context. But
I wanted to add something, Ingela. I was thinking exactly the same as Angela. I was saying you have perfect conditional preferences because you have conditional preferences with only 2 elements. what I call personal normative beliefs, which is a moral, the moral norm, let's say, and empirical expectations.
Yes.
Is
Correct,
interesting because the alpha and beta are only related to, what others in fact do. Okay. And my psychological cost is I pay too much, I pay too little, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Why not add normative expectation in the following sense? The psychological cost may not just be related to, in the case I give too little, but I would be reprimanded for giving too little if people give too much or much more than me. So the reputation effect, in some sense, is linked to the normative expectation.
Right.
So I wonder, why didn't you add that? So you have a full norm, basically, with a very important other element, which is the Kantian personal concern.
Thank you. Yeah. No, it's true that for sure one could add it. As I said, the genesis of this paper was really this preference class, and I was curious about what that preference class would do in this context. But I totally agree that, and in particular, if one wants to understand real world norms, it would seem strange not to include also normative expectations and possibly punishment and so forth. So I agree with that. So, and I clearly state that in the paper that, to get a full-fledged theory, then one should add that too. But I simply chose to not include it here to make also the model simple enough, because even though the public goods game here is really simple, it turns out that it's a quite rich model in spite of the simplicity of it. So I think it allows to distill some specific features of these preferences, and in the paper also do a comparison with altruism, for example, or conformity bias, and so. But I agree. In the longer run, I think one should absolutely include these other elements, which are really important, of course. Yeah. And so yes, so here in this second part, I should stop in about 7 minutes. Is that correct, Angela?
Yes, but because the format is the Q&A is going to be the last 15 minutes, but here we are also taking questions as you go, so the Q&A can also be a little shorter. So. Okay,
but I think I should be done by then. So here I introduce dynamics in a way which is which is found in many contributions in this literature. So here, this same interaction takes place at each point in discrete time, and people they're myopic in the sense that their beliefs, so the descriptive norm consists of backward looking. So the beliefs about others' action and today are completely based on what others did in the past. And so past actions are publicly observable, and people do not form more sophisticated beliefs about how others will adapt their behavior. So it's myopic. So here's, I'm going to do 2 thought experiments. So this is thought experiment 1, and there will be 2. So initially, there is a situation where the cost is so high that it doesn't make collective sense even for contributions to take place. So I'll give an example here, which is, let's say, solar panels. Okay, so solar panels 30 years ago, maybe they were so expensive and not so efficient. And so installing solar panels was not the right thing to do. Now, as the technology has changed, the cost has gone down and the benefit also, they have become more efficient. And so Nowadays, it could be that the benefit cost ratio is such that it is actually the right thing to do would be to install solar panels for everybody. Okay, so the question is then whether some spontaneous change in behavior can occur. So and so I assume here that initially nobody does install the solar panels, nobody contributes. But then the increase in the benefit to cost ratio implies that the Kantian reasoning sets in. And so everybody, if they're informed about this, they will change their personal moral norm. They switch from the right thing to do is to not contribute to the right thing to do is to contribute. And then the question is whether anything can happen. So as we know from before, that so because the beliefs are myopic, so initially nobody contributes. So for anything to happen, for somebody to start installing solar panels here, there must be some individuals who are sufficiently Kantian, right? So only those individuals with this Kantian parameter gamma I larger than this would start contributing at t equals to 1. And then the others observe that, and so they observe that the individuals, the total number of individuals who contributed at t equals 1 is n1. And then whether anything novel happens at in the second period depends on the thresholds of the other individuals. And so if there are some individuals whose threshold is met when n1 individuals contribute, then they start contributing and so forth. So we have a dynamic a la Granovetter, and which depends on these preference parameters, right? Alpha, beta, and gamma. Okay, and so at some point this process will stop. It will stop at a level which is also a Nash equilibrium. And so in this thought experiment, right, if we think about also the policy implications of this, so if the information here triggered a change of the personal moral norm, and this could also lead to some spontaneous change in the behavior. But as we can see here in this model, for any spontaneous norm change to occur, there must be some individuals who have sufficiently strong Kantian concerns. And one can also see generally that sacrifice aversion, there's a strong, so the positive alpha impedes norm change. People are not willing to contribute unless others, sufficiently many others do so, whereas solidarity towards those who contribute more facilitates norm change. And then I would like to go to thought experiment 2, which is eliminating an inefficient norm. So think about a situation where the true cost is so high that the right thing to do, or the collectively rational thing to do, would be to not contribute or not undertake the costly action. But suppose that initially all individuals believe, they hold a false belief that the benefit is so high so that it's collectively the right thing to do, right? So one can think of examples of such false beliefs. And so initially, right, if they hold these false beliefs, they also have the personal moral norm that undertaking the costly action is the right thing to do. And suppose that this is initially the case, that they all do undertake the costly action. And at some point in time, the beliefs of some subset of individuals are corrected. Maybe they get information, they read the press, or they read a scientific publication, and they realize that their beliefs about B was false. And so these informed individuals will switch the personal moral norm from doing the costly action to not doing the costly action. And their thresholds are modified. So, but then there are some uninformed individuals, and they still have this the old personal moral norm. But still, so if among the informed individuals there are some whose gamma, whose Kantian concern is large enough, and also if they do not have a strong enough solidarity towards those who do undertake the costly action, then they will stop undertaking the costly action. And so the number of individuals who undertake the costly action will start going down, and so forth, depending on the distribution of preferences, the thresholds. This will have can have an implication for those who are informed and also for those who are uninformed. So those who are uninformed believe that the right thing to do is to undertake the costly action, but if they see many others stop doing that, then they may also switch if they do not wish to have a smaller material cost benefit than others, and so forth. So this process also stops at some point. And so here, when we're in the presence of these inefficient, costly actions, then this first point is the same. That is, for any spontaneous norm change to occur, there must be some individuals who are sufficiently strongly Kantian. But here we get the opposite conclusion regarding the alpha. So here sacrifice aversion facilitates norm change, because here we have an inefficient costly action, and so people are just happy to increase their material payoff compared to others when they stop undertaking the costly action, whereas solidarity with those who undertake the costly action impedes norm change. And I think I'm about done. So the takeaways, I think, from this is that, this the model, I think, does make a contribution to this huge literature on norms by introducing a theory for how people form their personal moral norms, and it also introduces this notion of sacrifice, aversion, and solidarity in the material realm. And so these very simple preference class can explain why some individuals are leaders of norm change while others are followers. And it can also explain why behavioral norms vary over time, and because of injection of information, for example. And they can also explain why behavioral norms vary across space, because these preferences can be distributed differently. So in particular, if you have populations with very strong Kantian concerns, for example, you would tend to see more spontaneous norm changes than in populations where, for example, nobody is Kantian. The model also contributes to the literature on conditional cooperation, right? So because the Kantian concern pushes towards unconditional cooperation, whereas the social component makes cooperation conditional on others' behavior. And finally, right, what can we do with this? So is this useful for empirical work? Now, the good news is that there are some experimental papers that have sought to disentangle these Kantian concerns from the social concerns. And so it's been shown that this is possible to do with quite simple experimental tasks. And so, yes, I think that it would be really interesting to see if putting these together, one can actually say something about norm change. And I think that's it. Thank you. Should I stop sharing maybe the screen?
Yes, thank you so much, Ingela, for the fantastic presentation.
Thank
So
you.
we are still quite okay on time. So we have time until 2:15. So let's start the Q&A now. Anyone who has questions, please feel free to raise your hand, or also you can write in the chat. Okay, Christina.
I'm sorry. We should talk more privately, Ingela.
Okay.
I'm very interested in the dynamic, again, because it's like my idea of trendsetters are people who really dislike the norm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you said, well, trendsetters are people who have a very strong moral norm, which may be absolutely true. One little change, I would not call it Kantian, because Kantian norm is inflexible. So Kant would say, I shouldn't do that.
Right.
And the psychological, the social part would count for zero for Kant. So, but any moral norm, which is not, so crazy, would fit perfectly well your gamma. So I would say any moral norm, which, if I have a moral norm, I believe it is universalizable.
Right.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have it. Correct? So
will
any
not- I will
moral
not
norm
argue-
that people hold, okay, a Kantian norm would be really too strict in the sense the alpha and beta would not count for Kant. I just speak as a philosopher here. Philosopher
I
reads
will
no.
I would not argue with the I would not argue with the philosopher about Kant. That's
But if you say moral, I think it would be very, very good. The other thing which is interesting, so non-change, you have a strong moral norm. You dislike what happens, what people do. And you say, if many people then have an aversion to sacrifice, okay, so it looks to me as if basically what would happen with non-change, we are eliminating normative expectation here, which would be interesting to include actually, because it would change the threshold basically.
Yeah.
Because what you have here, you have progressive thresholds basically. And the strong moral people basically have a zero threshold or a very small threshold.
Yes, correct.
The Kantian is zero.
That's right. They may still suffer from making a larger sacrifice, because
exactly.
if they're sufficiently high gamma, then they will do it anyway. Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
And then in your model, so the dynamics of change is completely determined by the alpha, the progression of the alphas.
Yes and no. I mean, so it's relative to gamma always also.
It's always relative to gamma.
Absolutely.
I keep the gamma set.
Yeah.
But then
so if you keep, that would be an interesting thought experiment, I think.
Is all the alpha. And then again, though, in the example you gave, female genital cutting, etc., what is important, I think you can do it easily in your model, add normative expectation.
Yeah.
Because that would moderate this threshold increase, but it would still be possible, of course, but would be another important social dimension that in those cases would matter. I think you can reach the model with that without any trouble.
I'll think about that. Yes, it requires quite a bit of notation, but thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks, Christina. Moti?
Yeah, just to follow up on hi, do you hear me? Yeah, just to follow up on Christina's comment on the terminology, I would go one step further and say that it should be a universal moral norm and not just moral norm, because in your model, by definition, everybody must share the same norm. It is homogeneous. You cannot have heterogeneous social norms, right? And some moral norms could be heterogeneous. Like we are in a polarized world. Some people think the moral thing to do is to allow abortions. Some people think we should forbid abortions. Some people think we should allow people to carry guns. Some people think we should forbid it. So I think in many cases there is no consensus on the moral norm, but when it is a universal moral norm, then it follows by your definition. But I see Christina is not agreeing with me fully, so maybe it's her turn to comment.
Well, can I? Well, it's a very interesting conversation, I think. Any moral norm, if you think something is a moral norm, you think it should be universal. If you think it's a moral norm, you, Moti, you think X is a moral norm. I say, oh, really? You say, yeah, and it should be universal. Now, the question is, you say very correctly, there are very few universal moral norm. And I think Ingela work does not require that is a universal moral norm for everybody. is the individual who makes a choice think that my moral norm should be the norm that everybody follows. So when you think moral, you think universalizable for, you who think that something is moral. And I think Ingela model is perfectly fine with that, because the gamma is the individual. Ingela, correct me if I am wrong, please. If it's the individual who thinks this is a moral rule, this is important, and I act on the basis of that. So we don't need
But if individuals disagree, sorry.
To the if everybody has the same belief about what the benefit B is and what the cost is and what the population size that is affected, if they all have the same information, then they indeed agree on what is the right thing to do. But if they have different beliefs about what those costs and benefits are, they may disagree on what is the right thing to do. So you're both correct.
Then the predictions could diverge, no? So suppose half of the people think that the moral right thing to do in the public good game is to keep the money for yourself. Then the predictions would be different. This is why I argued that we need the universe.
So in the paper, I deal with that in the paper in detail. So I actually have also, that the beliefs about B can be different and they can differ across individuals. But the expressions for these thresholds do not change, but they do depend on, what I believe is the B. I can hold a false belief about, what the benefits from solar panels. Maybe I'm a, climate change denier, and so I believe that the benefit is zero, right? But I may believe in the positive impact on climate change, and so I believe that the B is high, and so we can disagree on what is the right thing to do. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else has any questions? Otherwise, I have a question, but I already asked plenty, so I'm gonna give the chance to someone who hasn't had the chance to ask yet. Otherwise, I will ask mine. Okay. I'm going to ask my question then. So I really, really like the implications of your model for norm and norm change and trendsetters, like Christina said. But my question is about the part where you try to also relate your model to the Fishbacher, Gacter, and Fair paper. I don't know if you can go back a second to that slide. The slide where you try to relate it to conditional operators and unconditional cooperation.
Can you see it? No.
No.
Sorry. Oops. Go back. No.
Yes, this is just a clarification question, but I agree that definitely the Kantian concern seems to push the individual towards unconditional cooperation. But it seemed to me that only the beta part of the social component, the solidarity part, should push people towards conditional cooperation, right? Because I was thinking if Kantian preferences are low, and the beta, let's say, is low, so people will become a free rider. They will only conditionally cooperate if they really don't want to contribute less than others. But if what they have, even if they're high in sacrifice aversion, I think as long as the beta is low, they will become a free rider, right? Just to clarify.
Absolutely, yeah. No, so it depends on the preferences, indeed. So, but one can find values of these alpha, beta, gamma such that you're a conditional cooperator. So again, it will really in those, because those are I was referring here to these repeated public goods games, right? So you typically, if you could measure the preferences of the subjects. And if you believe that there's nothing else going on, because I mean, if you believe that you have myopic beliefs, then you will find that for each individual, given the preferences of this individual, there either are going to be unconditional contributors or unconditional non-contributors, or they have a threshold somewhere between 0 and 1, and they're conditional. But it depends. It really depends. If I have a very high alpha. If I have very high alpha, then I will need also a much higher gamma to become an unconditional contributor. So they're all interrelated. So
I see.
if you look
Yes,
at
I
this
see your
expression
point.
here, right? If I have a very high alpha here, I will also need a high gamma for this threshold not to be above 1, for example.
Yes, yes, I see your point now. Thank you so much, Ingela. Well, we are out of time. We are now at 2:15. So thank you again so much for the fantastic presentation. Very interesting model.
Thank you for this wonderful discussion. I really appreciate your feedback. And do not hesitate to write an email if you have other thoughts.
Yes, both talks today were really exciting. So again, thank you everyone today for participating in our first NoBeC talk of the year. Thank you again, Jeannie, so much, and Ingela for the exciting presentations and contributions. And thank you everyone who has participated in contributing for questions. So now we look forward to everyone's participation in the next NoBeC talk by Valerio Capraro in February 19th. And until then, just to wrap up, thank you again, everyone, and we look forward to having you with us next time.